The rain beat against the windows of the small coffee shop where I worked, turning the evening streetlights into blurred halos. I wiped down the counter for the 5th time that hour, my fingers raw from the sanitizer solution. Only 2 customers remained, an elderly man reading yesterday's newspaper, and a college student whose laptop had been open to the same page for hours. "Ellie, you can head out early if you want," Marco, my manager, called from the back room. "I'll close up." I glanced at the clock. 9:42 p.m. The thought of walking 6 blocks to my apartment in this downpour made my shoulders slump, but I needed the full shift. Every hour counted when rent was due in 3 days. "I'll stay," I replied, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind my ear, careful to use my right hand. My left sleeve was pulled down past my wrist, concealing the lattice of scars that had become my most closely guarded secret. The bell above the door chimed, bringing with it a gust of cold air and the metallic scent of rain. I didn't look up immediately, assuming it was just another late-night customer seeking shelter. But the atmosphere in the room shifted, something I felt before I consciously registered it. The college student glanced up, then quickly looked back down. The elderly man folded his newspaper. Heavy footsteps approached, followed by lighter ones, multiple people, moving with purpose. I finally looked up, and my breath caught. He stood at the counter, water beating off an overcoat that cost more than my monthly rent. Tall, with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that seemed to compress the air around him. Dark hair, flecked with silver at the temples, was slicked back from a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins, all sharp angles and authority. But it was his eyes that made my hand still on the counter. Dark amber, almost gold in the coffee shop's warm lighting, and utterly, terrifyingly focused on me. A second man stood 2 paces behind him. Younger, with watchful eyes that scanned the room continuously. The bodyguard's hand never strayed far from the slight bulge beneath his jacket. "Good evening," I said, my customer service voice kicking in automatically. "What can I get for you?" The man didn't respond immediately. His eyes moved over my face with such intensity that I had to fight the urge to step back. There was something analytical in his gaze, as if he were reading a book written in my features. "Americano. Black." His voice was low, rough-edged, with the faintest hint of an accent I couldn't place. "Italian, maybe, or Eastern European." I nodded and turned to the espresso machine, grateful for the reprieve from those eyes. My hands trembled slightly as I worked, hyper-aware of his presence just feet away. I'd served countless customers in my 3 years working here, but none had made the air feel so charged, so dangerous. "Your name?" I asked, marker poised over the cup, following the cafe's protocol even though we were practically empty. "Alessandro," he replied after a pause, as though deciding whether to tell me his real name. I wrote it on the cup, suddenly conscious of my handwriting. When I turned back, he was studying my left arm, the arm I always kept covered. Self-consciously, I tugged my sleeve lower. "That will be $3.75, I said, sliding the cup across the counter. He placed a $100 bill down. "Keep it. I can't accept." "You can." It wasn't said unkindly, but there was no room for argument. As I hesitated, his bodyguard shifted impatiently. Alessandro silenced him with a subtle gesture, just a slight tilt of his head. "Thank you," I finally said, taking the bill. My fingertips brushed against his hand, warm despite the rain, and marked with small scars across the knuckles. Fighting scars. Alessandro took his coffee and chose the table nearest the counter, positioning himself so he could see both the door and me. His bodyguard remained standing, creating a barrier between his boss and the rest of the room. For the next 20 minutes, I felt his eyes on me as I wiped down tables and restocked supplies. The college student packed up and left. The elderly man followed soon after. Now it was just me, Marco in the back office, and the 2 strangers. At 10:15, Marco emerged. "Almost done out here, Ellie?" His eyes drifted to Alessandro and his companion, narrowing slightly in recognition. Marco's face paled. "We're closing in 15 minutes, gentlemen," he said, his voice unnaturally tight. Alessandro nodded once but made no move to leave. Marco gave me a worried look before returning to the back room. At 10:28, I began the closing routine, my movements mechanical as I tried to ignore the man who continued to watch me. When I approached his table, he finally spoke again. "You work here every night?" The question startled me. Most nights. "Alone?" A warning bell sounded in my head. "No. My manager's always here." I gestured toward the back room. Alessandro's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. "And then you walk home. 6 blocks to Westview Apartments. Alone." My blood turned to ice. How did he know where I lived? I took an instinctive step back, calculating the distance to the panic button beneath the counter. "Don't be afraid," he said, reading my intentions. "If I meant you harm, we wouldn't be having this conversation. What do you want?" My voice emerged as barely a whisper. He studied me for a long moment. "You remind me of someone." "I'm nobody," I said. His expression changed subtly, something like interest flickering in those amber eyes. Nobody doesn't hide their arms in the middle of summer. Nobody doesn't flinch at shadows. My left hand moved unconsciously to cover my wrist. "I need to close up now." Alessandro stood in one fluid motion. He was taller than I'd realized, towering over my 5'4" frame. "My driver will take you home tonight." It wasn't a request. "That's not necessary," I said, even as the thought of walking home in the dark made my heart race. 3 months ago, I might have accepted. But 3 months ago, I hadn't learned how quickly safety could become a cage. "The rain is getting worse." Alessandro nodded toward the windows, where water now streamed in sheets, and there was an incident 2 blocks from here last night. I'd heard nothing about any incident, but the certainty in his voice made me hesitate. Before I could respond, Marco emerged from the back room, coat in hand. "Ellie, you should accept Mr. Ricci's offer," he said, his voice strained. "It's not safe out there tonight." The name registered like a physical blow. Ricci. Even I, as disconnected as I tried to stay from the city's underbelly, knew that name. Alessandro Ricci controlled half the waterfront and everything that moved through it. The papers called him a businessman, a philanthropist, words that tiptoed around what everyone knew. He was one of the most powerful crime bosses in the city, and he knew where I lived. "Okay," I whispered, surrender washing over me. "Just a ride home." 20 minutes later, I sat in the back of a black Bentley, separated from Alessandro by mere inches of leather upholstery. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and something metallic that I tried not to identify. The bodyguard, whose name I'd learned was Dominic, drove, his eyes occasionally meeting mine in the rearview mirror. The rain transformed the city into a watery kaleidoscope outside the windows. We passed through streets I walked every day, but from inside this car they felt alien, as though I were seeing a different layer of reality. "Why me?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. "Why offer a ride to a coffee shop employee?" Alessandro turned those unsettling eyes on me. "Your manager owes me a favor. Ensuring his staff's safety falls within that obligation." I wasn't sure I believed him, but I nodded anyway. We lapsed into silence until the car pulled up outside my apartment building, a shabby 6-story structure with flickering exterior lights. Before Dominic could come around to open the door, Alessandro's hand settled on my arm, my left arm, over the fabric covering my scars. "The things we hide define us more than what we show," he said, his voice so low I had to lean in to hear him. "Remember that, Eliana Parker." My full name hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't given it to him. I hadn't given it to anyone at the coffee shop. "How—" "Good night," he interrupted, removing his hand. "Perhaps we'll speak again." I practically fell out of the car in my haste to escape. The Bentley remained at the curb until I was safely inside the building's lobby, where the overhead light flickered in its familiar pattern. Only when the elevator doors closed did I hear the engine purr to life and fade into the night. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Small, sparse, but mine. I locked the door, then checked it twice before sliding the chain into place. My hands shook as I collapsed onto the couch, mind racing. Alessandro Ricci knew my name. Knew where I lived, where I worked. Had watched me with those predator's eyes that seemed to see through every defense I'd built. I should have been terrified, and I was. But there was something else, something I didn't want to acknowledge. For the first time since I'd escaped Jason 3 months ago, someone had looked at me, really looked at me, and seen past the careful mask I wore. "Stop hiding," his eyes had seemed to say. I pushed up my sleeve, revealing the constellation of circular burn scars and thin white lines that mapped the history of my relationship with Jason. Evidence of 2 years spent with a man whose love had turned to possession, then to cruelty. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox tomorrow morning." I stared at the screen until it went dark, then locked it and set it aside. Whatever Alessandro Ricci wanted from me, I doubted I had a choice in the matter. Men like him didn't take no for an answer. But as I prepared for bed, I couldn't help wondering, what would happen if, just once, I stopped hiding? Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through the blinds I'd forgotten to close. I blinked awake, momentarily disoriented before the events of the previous night flooded back. Alessandro Ricci, the ride home, the text message. "Check your mailbox." I dragged myself out of bed, pulled on a robe over my sleep shirt and shorts, and slipped into worn slippers. My building's mailboxes were in the lobby. A journey that normally wouldn't require much thought. Today, it felt like walking into the unknown. The elevator creaked its way down 6 floors. Each second stretched longer than the last, my mind conjuring increasingly disturbing possibilities of what might be waiting for me. A threat? A demand? Something worse? The lobby was empty save for Mrs. Fernandez watering the sad-looking potted plant by the entrance. I nodded to her and approached the wall of tarnished brass mailboxes, fishing my key from my robe pocket. Box 603 opened with its usual resistance. Inside lay a single cream-colored envelope, heavyweight paper with no postmark or return address. Just my name, Eliana Parker, written in elegant black script. With trembling fingers, I removed it, closed the mailbox, and retreated to the elevator, before curiosity overcame my caution. Once inside the privacy of my apartment, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a business card, Alessandro Ricci, CEO, Ricci Enterprises, followed by a phone number. On the back, handwritten in the same elegant script, "For when you're ready to stop hiding." Beneath the card lay a smaller envelope. I opened it to find a check made out to me for $5,000. I dropped it like it had burned me, blood money. But for what? I hadn't done anything for him, hadn't agreed to anything. My mind raced through possibilities, each more alarming than the last. Was this payment for services he expected? A bribe? Hush money? Or something else entirely? I left the check and card on my coffee table and got ready for my shift at the diner, my morning job before the evening coffee shop hours. By the time I locked my apartment, I'd convinced myself to ignore Alessandro Ricci and whatever game he was playing. I'd return the check tonight, tell him I wasn't interested in whatever he wanted. The morning passed in a blur of coffee refills and breakfast orders. My coworker, Tina, noticed my distraction. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said during a rare quiet moment. "Everything okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just didn't sleep well." "That guy still giving you trouble? The ex?" Her eyes flicked to my covered arm. "No," I said quickly. "No, I haven't heard from Jason in weeks. It wasn't entirely true. He'd called twice last week from a blocked number, breathing into the phone without speaking. I'd changed my number after that, but the dread remained. A constant companion. Jason wouldn't let go easily. Possessive men never did. The lunch rush began, saving me from further questions. I moved through the motions mechanically, my thoughts returning to the check on my coffee table and the man who had sent it. At 2:30, I clocked out and headed home to shower and change before my evening shift at Brood Awakening. The walk felt different today. I caught myself scanning passing cars, half expecting to see a black Bentley. Relief and something like disappointment mingled when I saw nothing unusual. Back in my apartment, I stared at the check and card, still lying where I'd left them. After a long moment, I picked up the card and examined it more closely. The paper was thick, the lettering embossed. I ran my finger over the raised surfaces, wondering what kind of CEO took personal interest in coffee shop employees. A dangerous one, my instincts warned. I tucked the card and check back into the envelope and slipped it into my bag. I'd return it tonight if he came back to the coffee shop. If not, I'd figure something out. $5,000 would cover 3 months of rent. It would give me breathing room, maybe enough to finally leave the city Start somewhere Jason couldn't find me, but at what cost? I arrived at Brood Awakening 10 minutes early, my eyes automatically scanning the interior. No sign of Alessandro or his bodyguard. Marco greeted me with unusual warmth. Ellie, good to see you made it home safe last night. There was something forced in his cheerfulness. I hung up my coat and tied on my apron. How do you know him, Marco? Marco's smile faltered. Mr. Ricci? He's an investor in several businesses around here. Very influential man. He's a criminal, I said quietly. Marco flinched. Don't say that. Not even joking. He leaned closer. Look, if Mr. Ricci takes an interest in you, just be respectful. He can make life very good or very bad for people. Understand? I understood all too well. I'd escaped one controlling man only to draw the attention of another. This one far more powerful and dangerous. The evening crowd trickled in, mostly students and evening workers stopping for caffeine before heading home. Each time the door opened, I tensed, expecting amber eyes and that intense stare. But 8 p.m. came and went with no sign of Alessandro Ricci. By 9:30, I'd begun to relax, convincing myself that last night had been a one-time occurrence. Perhaps I really had just reminded him of someone. Perhaps the check was some eccentric rich man's idea of charity. Then the door opened, and the atmosphere shifted just as it had the night before. But it wasn't Alessandro who entered. It was Dominic, the bodyguard, alone. He approached the counter with purposeful strides. Miss Parker, he greeted me, formal and cold. Mr. Ricci requests your presence. My hands stilled on the register. I'm working. Dominic's expression didn't change. Your shift ends in 30 minutes. Mr. Ricci's driver will be waiting outside. And if I decline, his eyes flicked to Marco, who was pretending not to listen from the pastry case. Mr. Ricci doesn't extend invitations lightly. It would be unwise to refuse. The threat was implicit but clear. I swallowed hard. I'll need to go home first. To change. Dominic nodded once. The driver will take you. 45 minutes. He turned and left without ordering anything. Marco was at my side immediately. What did he want? Apparently, I have a dinner invitation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Ellie. Marco ran a hand through his thinning hair. Be careful. Ricci is complicated, dangerous, yes, but not in the way you might think. What does that mean? He shook his head. Just don't lie to him. Ever. He values honesty above all else. He paused. And return whatever he gave you if you don't want to be in his debt. I thought of the check in my bag. How did you know he gave me something? Because that's how it starts, Marco said, turning away. That's how it always starts. 45 minutes later, I sat in the back of a different car. A Mercedes this time, with a silent driver who wasn't Dominic. We'd stopped at my apartment long enough for me to change into the only dress I owned, a simple black sheath that I'd bought for job interviews. I'd brushed my hair, applied minimal makeup, and grabbed the envelope with the check. The car took me to the waterfront, where glass-fronted high-rises reflected the city lights across the harbor. We pulled up in front of the most exclusive of them all, the Pinnacle, where penthouses started at several $1 million. The driver escorted me through a private entrance to a dedicated elevator requiring a key card. Mr. Ricci is expecting you, he said, swiping the card and pressing the button marked P. It was the only thing he'd said since picking me up. The elevator rose smoothly to the top floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a private foyer with marble floors and subtle lighting. Dominic waited there, his expression as impassive as ever. This way, he said, leading me through double doors into what had to be the most beautiful apartment I'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of the city and harbor, glittering like fallen stars. Minimalist furniture in shades of cream and gray complemented the dark hardwood floors. Nothing was ostentatious, yet everything screamed money and power. Alessandro stood by the windows, his back to me, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He'd exchanged last night's overcoat for a tailored charcoal suit that accentuated the breadth of his shoulders. When he turned, those unsettling eyes found mine immediately. Eliana, he said. my name sounding different in his accent. "Thank you for coming." As if I'd had a choice. "Mr. Ricci," I acknowledged, clutching my purse where the envelope waited. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I came to return this." I withdrew the envelope and held it out to him. Alessandro made no move to take it. "You haven't even looked at the contents properly." "It's a check for $5,000, I said. "Money I didn't earn and don't want." His lips curved slightly. "Pride. Interesting." He gestured to the dining table set for two near the windows. "Join me for dinner before you make your decision." It wasn't a request. I hesitated, then placed the envelope on a side table and followed him. Dominic disappeared through a door I presumed led to the kitchen, leaving us alone. Alessandro held out a chair for me, the perfect gentleman. I sat, hyper-aware of his proximity as he moved to take the seat opposite me, a bottle of wine already breathed between us. "You're wondering why you're here," he said, pouring wine into crystal glasses. "Among other things." He handed me a glass. "Such as?" "Such as how you know my name, where I live, why you're interested in a coffee shop barista." Alessandro studied me over the rim of his glass. "Information is currency in my world. Knowing things others don't is how I've survived." He set his glass down. "As for why let's call it curiosity. About what?" "About a woman who carries herself like someone hunted." His eyes moved to my left arm, covered by the long sleeve of my dress. "About scars she thinks define her." My breath caught. I fought the urge to touch my sleeve, to ensure it still covered everything. "You don't know anything about me. I know you escaped an abusive relationship 3 months ago," he said matter-of-factly. "I know your ex-boyfriend, Jason Mercer, has a record of domestic violence complaints from 2 previous girlfriends, though charges were dropped both times. I know he's been looking for you." The wine glass nearly slipped from my fingers. "How could you possibly—" "I told you. Information is currency." Alessandro leaned forward slightly. "What I don't know is why you're still hiding." Anger flashed through me, hot and sudden. Because he threatened to kill me if I left him. Because the police wouldn't do anything until he actually hurt me again. Because the restraining order is just a piece of paper that won't stop a bullet. The words burst out before I could stop them, raw and honest. Alessandro didn't react to my outburst except for a slight narrowing of his eyes. "Now, we're getting somewhere," he said softly. Dominic returned with the first course, some kind of delicate seafood appetizer that I barely noticed as he set it before us. My outburst hung in the air between Alessandro and me, my vulnerability exposed like a fresh wound. "Eat," Alessandro said, his tone gentler than before. "We can talk after." I picked up my fork mechanically, though my appetite had vanished. The food was exquisite. I registered that dimly, but each bite felt like ash in my mouth. Alessandro ate with the precise movements of a man accustomed to control in all things. Neither of us spoke until our plates were cleared, and Dominic had brought the main course. Perfectly seared steak with roasted vegetables. 3 months ago, Alessandro finally said, breaking the silence. One of my security teams reported an incident at Harbor View Apartments. A woman fleeing an apartment at 3 a.m, bleeding from the face. The man who lived there searched for her for 2 hours before giving up. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Harbor View had been my home with Jason. The place I'd fled that night when his rage had finally broken something in me, something that had made me brave enough to run. Your people were watching our apartment? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. My people watch everything on the east side, Alessandro corrected, including a coffee shop 6 blocks from where you now live. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. So that's why you approached me. You recognized me from that night. Alessandro's eyes never left mine. I recognized someone who survived, someone strong enough to leave. A bitter laugh escaped me. Strong? I lived with his abuse for 2 years before I found the courage to go. There's nothing strong about that. Survival isn't weakness, Eliana. He set down his knife and fork. The scars you hide, they're proof you endured. Proof you're still here. His words burrowed under my skin, touching something raw and painful. Why do you care? What am I to you? Some kind of charity case? A broken bird you can fix to feel better about whatever terrible things you do? Alessandro didn't flinch at my accusation. Instead, he rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a forearm marked by a pattern of scars I recognized immediately. Cigarette burns. They were old, faded to white circles against his olive skin, but unmistakable. My father, he said simply, believed pain built character. He started when I was 7. I stared at the scars, so similar to my own, yet different. His were decades old, worn with a strange kind of pride. Mine were fresher, still pink in places, carried with shame. What happened to him? I asked quietly. Alessandro's smile was cold. He died when I was 17. There was a story there, one I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He rolled his sleeve back down with deliberate movements. The money isn't charity, he continued. It's an investment. In what? In freedom. Yours. He leaned back, watching my reaction. $5,000, enough to leave the city, start somewhere new, somewhere Jason Mercer would never find you. The offer hung between us, tempting and impossible. Why would you do that for a stranger? Perhaps I don't like men who burn women. His voice had hardened, the accent more pronounced. Perhaps I don't like unfinished business. A chill ran through me. What does that mean? It means Jason Mercer continues to search for you. It means he's made inquiries in neighborhoods near your coffee shop. It means he's becoming more desperate. Alessandro's eyes held mine. Desperate men are dangerous, Eliana. You know this. My hands began to tremble. I set down my fork before Alessandro could notice, but his gaze missed nothing. He's found you, hasn't he? He asked, his voice dangerously soft. Calls from blocked numbers, I admitted. Breathing, no words. I changed my number last week. Alessandro nodded, unsurprised. And you think that will stop him? It wasn't a question. We both knew the answer. What's the alternative? I whispered. Running forever? Looking over my shoulder in every new city? There are other solutions. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. What kind of solutions? Permanent ones. The word hung in the air between us. I shook my head, pushing back from the table. No. Whatever you're suggesting, no. I didn't come here for that. Alessandro remained calm. Then why did you come? The question stopped me. Why had I come? I could have refused Dominic, called in sick to work, hidden in my apartment. But I hadn't. Part of me had wanted this meeting, wanted answers to the questions that had haunted me since last night. I came to understand what you want from me. I finally said, I want nothing from you. Alessandro rose from his chair and moved to the window, looking out at the city below. What I'm offering is a choice. Take the money, leave, start a new life. Or stay, and accept my protection. Protection, I repeated. At what price? He turned, and in the low light, his eyes seemed to glow with that predatory gleam. No price. No conditions. I don't believe you. Men like you don't give something for nothing. Men like me. There was a dangerous edge to his voice now. Killers. Criminals. I lifted my chin. I've read the papers, Mr. Ricci. I know what you are. In an instant, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Alessandro's face hardened into an expressionless mask. He crossed the space between us in 3 long strides, stopping so close I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something darker. You know nothing about what I am. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than a shout. The papers print what I allow them to print. The truth is something else entirely. I should have been afraid. Any sane person would have been, but something in me, the part that had survived Jason, that had crawled out of that apartment bleeding but unbroken, refused to cower. Then tell me the truth, I challenged. Why are you really doing this? For a long moment, Alessandro simply looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he stepped back. My sister, he said, the words coming reluctantly. 19 years ago, her boyfriend was like your Jason, jealous, controlling. I was away on business when it happened. By the time I returned, it was too late. Understanding dawned, cold and clear. He killed her. Alessandro's jaw tightened. She hid her scars too. wore long sleeves even in summer, made excuses for bruises. I saw the signs but did nothing, believing she had to make her own choices. His eyes held mine. It was the greatest failure of my life. The raw honesty in his voice struck me like a physical blow. This dangerous man, this criminal, was showing me a wound that had never healed, one that mirrored my own. "I'm sorry about your sister," I said softly. "But I'm not her. You can't save me to atone for not saving her." "I'm not trying to save you, Eliana." Something shifted in his expression. "I'm offering you the means to save yourself." Our eyes locked, and in that moment, something electric passed between us. A current of understanding that transcended words. We were both scarred, both haunted by the past. The difference was that Alessandro had transformed his pain into power, while I was still running from mine. The moment was broken by Dominic's return. "Sir, there's a situation that requires your attention." Alessandro straightened, instantly reverting to the controlled crime boss. "Excuse me for a moment," he said to me, following Dominic from the room. Left alone, I moved to the window, gazing out at the city spread below like a carpet of lights. Somewhere out there, Jason was looking for me. How long before he found me? How long before a blocked call became a shadow following me home? Became hands around my throat. Alessandro returned within minutes, his expression grave. "I apologize for the interruption. Unfortunately, business matters require my immediate attention." He paused. "My driver will take you home when you're ready." I nodded, strangely disappointed. "Thank you for dinner." "The offer stands," he said. "Both offers. The money is yours, whether you choose to leave or stay. I still don't understand why." Alessandro's expression softened almost imperceptibly. 3 months ago, you found the courage to walk away from a monster, to survive. I respect that more than you know. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small black device, holding it out to me. A cell phone. "This is programmed with one number, mine. It's secure, untraceable. If you ever feel unsafe, if you ever see him, call, day or night." I hesitated, then took the phone. It was small, expensive, nothing like my cheap prepaid. "I don't know if I can accept all this." "You can. You will." His certainty was absolute, because beneath your fear, Eliana Parker, there's something stronger. Something that refuses to be broken. As his words sank in, I realized he saw something in me that I had long since stopped seeing in myself. Strength, resilience, worth. "Stop hiding your scars," Alessandro said softly. "They tell the story of your survival, not your weakness." The drive home passed in silence, my mind racing with everything that had happened. The driver left me at my building with a respectful nod, waiting until I was inside before pulling away. In my apartment, I placed the phone in the envelope with the check on my nightstand. Sleep seemed impossible with my thoughts in such turmoil. I showered, letting hot water cascade over me as I replayed every moment of the evening. Alessandro's face, his voice, the scars on his arm that matched my own, his sister's story, the choice he'd given me, stay or go. As I dried off, I caught my reflection in the mirror, something I usually avoided. For the first time in months, I really looked at myself, at the faded yellowish bruise on my ribs, at the constellation of circular burns on my left arm, at the thin white line along my collarbone where Jason's signet ring had cut me the night I finally left. "Stop hiding your scars. They tell the story of your survival, not your weakness." Alessandro's words echoed in my mind. I traced the largest scar with my fingertip, remembering the night Jason had held my arm against the stove burner because I'd spoken to a male customer at the diner. I'd screamed then, but I hadn't left. It had taken 3 more months of escalating abuse before I found the courage to run, but I had run. I had survived. Maybe that did count for something. The black phone on my nightstand seemed to watch me as I dressed for bed. It represented something I hadn't had in a long time, a safety net. Someone powerful enough to stand between me and Jason. The thought was both comforting and disturbing. I slipped under the covers, my mind still churning with decisions I wasn't ready to make. Leave town with the money? Stay and accept Alessandro's protection? Neither option was simple. Both came with complications I could barely begin to untangle. Sleep finally claimed me in the early hours of the morning. My dreams filled with amber eyes and scarred hands offering either salvation or damnation. I couldn't tell which. I woke to pounding on my apartment door. Heart racing, I scrambled out of bed, checking the clock. 7:14 a.m., too early for any normal visitor. The pounding came again, more insistent. "Eliana, I know you're in there. Open the door." The voice froze my blood. "Jason." "I can stand out here all day, Ellie." Jason's voice carried through the door, that deceptively charming tone he used in public. "The neighbors are getting quite a show. Is that what you want?" My breath came in shallow gasps as panic clawed at my chest. How had he found me? I'd been so careful. New phone, new apartment, no social media. "Just 5 minutes," he called, softer now. "That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes to talk." I knew better than to believe him. 5 minutes would become an hour, would become a night, would become a return to the hell I'd escaped. My eyes darted to the nightstand where the black phone lay, Alessandro's phone. The pounding resumed, harder this time. "Eliana, don't make me angry, baby. You know what happens when I get angry." I did know. The scars on my body were a roadmap of Jason's anger. With trembling hands, I grabbed the black phone and retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I slid down against the bathtub, knees to my chest, and pressed the single button on the phone. It rang once before a voice answered. Yes, Alessandro's voice, alert despite the early hour. "He's here," I whispered. "At my apartment, pounding on the door, a beat of silence. Are you safe at the moment?" "In the bathroom, door locked. But he won't leave, and eventually," I swallowed hard. "Eventually the neighbors will call the police, and by the time they arrive..." "Stay where you are," Alessandro said, his tone shifting to something cold and efficient. "Dominic is 3 minutes away. I'm 7. I closed my eyes, relief washing through me. "Thank you." "Did you sleep in a room with a window?" he asked. "Yes. But I'm on the 6th floor. The fire escape runs past your bedroom window. If he breaks in before we arrive, go out that way. Understand?" I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me. "Yes." 3 minutes, Alessandro repeated, then ended the call. Outside the bathroom, Jason's voice had changed, becoming the low, menacing growl I knew too well. "You think hiding from me changes anything? I'll break this fucking door down if I have to. You're mine, Ellie. You've always been mine." I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block out the sound. From the hallway came the voices of neighbors, curious, concerned, but not intervening. No one ever did. 1 minute passed. 2. Jason's threats grew more specific, more violent. The bathroom door seemed flimsy, inadequate protection against the rage on the other side. Then suddenly, silence. I held my breath, straining to hear. Had he given up? Left? It seemed unlikely. Jason never gave up when he wanted something. And he wanted me. Not out of love, but because I had dared to leave him, dared to suggest he didn't own me. A new sound broke the silence. A sharp crack, followed by the splintering of wood. He was breaking in. Heart pounding, I scrambled to my feet. I had perhaps seconds before he breached the door. Following Alessandro's instructions, I darted from the bathroom to my bedroom, throwing open the window that led to the fire escape. Cold morning air rushed in as I swung one leg over the sill. "Eliana." I looked back to see Jason standing in my bedroom doorway, his handsome face contorted with fury. 6 feet of coiled anger in a designer shirt, his blue eyes burning with a familiar madness. The sight of him, so close, so real, paralyzed me for a crucial second. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm, my scarred arm, in a grip that promised new bruises. "Where do you think you're going? We're not finished. Let go." I twisted, trying to break his hold, but his fingers only dug deeper. "You think you can just leave? Start over like nothing happened?" Jason yanked me back from the window. "Everything you are is because of me. Everything you'll ever be belongs to me. No." With strength born of desperation, I brought my knee up hard between his legs. Jason doubled over with a grunt of pain, his grip loosening just enough for me to wrench free. I scrambled back toward the window, but he recovered quickly, grabbing a fistful of my hair and pulling me back with such force that I crashed to the floor. "You bitch!" he snarled, standing over me. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By running? By hiding?" He knelt, pinning me with his weight. "No one will ever love you like I do. No one will ever want you, damaged, scarred, worthless." His hands closed around my throat, squeezing. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as I clawed at his arms, his face, anything I could reach. The pressure increased, cutting off my air completely. This is how I die, I thought with strange clarity. After everything, this is where it ends. Then suddenly, wonderfully, the pressure was gone. Jason's weight vanished as he was bodily lifted and thrown across the room. He hit the wall with a sickening thud, sliding to the floor in a daze. Dominic stood over him, expression unchanged from his usual stoicism, but a dangerous energy radiated from him. Behind him, another man, one I didn't recognize, positioned himself at the bedroom door, hand inside his jacket where a weapon undoubtedly waited. I gasped for air, my vision clearing as oxygen returned to my lungs. Dominic didn't spare me a glance. His attention remained fixed on Jason, who was struggling to his feet. "Who the fuck are you?" Jason demanded, blood trickling from a cut on his temple. Dominic didn't answer, merely stepped closer, hurting Jason back against the wall. "You work for her now? She's paying you to fight her battles?" Jason's eyes darted to me, then to the door, calculating his chances. "Whatever she's giving you, I can double it." Before Dominic could respond, a new presence filled the doorway. Alessandro, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit despite the early hour, surveyed the scene with those predatory amber eyes. They moved from me, still on the floor, bruises forming on my neck, to Jason, trapped against the wall. Something dangerous flickered in Alessandro's expression. He stepped into the room, and despite Jason having several inches on him in height, Alessandro somehow seemed to tower over everyone present. "Mr. Mercer," he said, his accented voice deceptively soft, "you've made a grave miscalculation today." Jason's confidence faltered visibly. Even he, arrogant, entitled Jason, recognized the threat standing before him. "Who are you?" he asked, with considerably less bravado than he'd shown Dominic. "Someone who doesn't appreciate men who burn women," Alessandro replied, echoing the words he'd spoken to me last night. Understanding dawned on Jason's face. "This is about Ellie? Listen, this is between me and her. We have history. She's confused, playing the victim." Alessandro moved so quickly I barely registered it. One moment he was standing calmly by the door. The next he had Jason pinned to the wall by his throat. A mirror of what Jason had done to me moments before. "Let me be very clear, Mr. Mercer," Alessandro said, his voice still eerily calm despite the violence of his actions. "Eliana Parker is under my protection now. My personal protection. Do you understand what that means?" Jason's eyes bulged as he clawed at Alessandro's grip. Finally, Alessandro released him, letting him slide down the wall, gasping for air. "It means," Alessandro continued, straightening his cuffs, "that if you ever come near her again, if you ever speak her name again, if you so much as think about her too intently, what happens next will make your worst nightmare seem like a pleasant dream." Jason coughed, rubbing his throat. "You can't threaten me. I'll go to the police," Alessandro laughed, a sound utterly devoid of humor. "Please do. Tell them Alessandro Ricci threatened you. See how sympathetic they are." The name registered with Jason, his face paling dramatically. "Ricci? He cut himself off, finally understanding the depth of his predicament. "Yes," Alessandro confirmed mildly. "That Ricci." He turned to Dominic. "Mr. Mercer was just leaving the city, wasn't he? In fact, I believe he's relocating to the West Coast, effective immediately." Dominic nodded, hauling Jason to his feet. "I'll make the arrangements. Wait," I said, finding my voice at last. All eyes turned to me as I struggled to stand, using the wall for support. I want to say something to him first. Alessandro studied me for a moment, then nodded. Dominic maintained his grip on Jason, but turned him to face me, I stepped forward until I was directly in front of the man who had tormented me for 2 years, the man whose rage had marked my body with permanent reminders of his cruelty. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me, fear giving way to a cold, clear strength. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed up the sleeve of my sleep shirt, revealing the network of burn scars that covered my left forearm. Scars he had given me, one by one, over months of escalating abuse. "These don't make me damaged," I said, my voice steady despite the raw pain in my throat. "They don't make me weak. They make me a survivor." I met his gaze unflinchingly. "And they're the last thing you'll ever take from me." Jason's face twisted with hatred, but beneath it, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. "Get him out of my sight," Alessandro instructed, and Dominic dragged Jason from the room. The other man followed, leaving me alone with Alessandro. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. My legs trembled with delayed shock and adrenaline, threatening to give way beneath me. Alessandro seemed to notice, gesturing to the edge of the bed. "Sit before you fall," he said. I sank onto the mattress, suddenly exhausted. Alessandro remained standing, his posture rigid, controlled, but his eyes burned with a cold fury that wasn't directed at me. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his gaze moving to the bruises forming on my neck. "I'll live." My voice came out raspy from the assault on my throat. "That's not what I asked." I managed a weak smile. "Nothing broken, nothing permanent." Alessandro nodded once, apparently satisfied. "Pack whatever you need for a few days." "You can't stay here." "Where am I going?" "Somewhere safe." His tone left no room for argument. "Jason Mercer will be leaving the state today, but your apartment is compromised." He could have shared the location with others. The thought sent a fresh wave of fear through me. "I don't have anywhere else to go." "You do now." Alessandro moved to the window, closing it. "Pack. We leave in 10 minutes." Questions swirled in my mind, but exhaustion and the lingering terror of Jason's attack left me without the energy to argue. I nodded, rising on unsteady legs to gather what I'd need. Clothes, toiletries, my few important documents. Alessandro left the room, giving me privacy. Though I could hear him speaking quietly on the phone in the living room, I moved mechanically, trying not to think about what had just happened, or what would happen next. 10 minutes later, I emerged with a small duffel bag. Alessandro stood in my ruined doorway, surveying the splintered wood where Jason had forced his way in. "Ready?" he asked, turning to me. I nodded, clutching my bag like a shield. Outside, a black SUV waited, Dominic at the wheel. Of Jason, there was no sign. Alessandro held the back door for me, then slid in beside me. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the apartment that had been my refuge for 3 months, now tainted by Jason's intrusion. "Where is he?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. Alessandro's expression remained neutral. "Being escorted to the airport. He'll be on a plane within 2 hours, with a strong incentive never to return." I didn't ask what that incentive was. Some questions were better left unanswered. "Thank you," I said instead. "If you hadn't come when you did." "But I did." His hand moved to cover mine, warm and steady. "And I always will, now that you're under my protection." In that moment, exhausted and shaken as I was, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Safety. True safety. Not the fragile illusion of it I'd constructed for myself these past months. As the city passed outside the windows, I realized I'd made my choice without even knowing it. I wasn't running anymore. For better or worse, I was staying. Under the protection of a man perhaps as dangerous as the one I'd just escaped, but for entirely different reasons. The question was, what happened next? The SUV wound through the city streets before turning onto a tree-lined private drive I'd never noticed before. We passed through a gate manned by security guards who nodded respectfully to Alessandro, then continued up a winding road to a sprawling Mediterranean-style estate set back from the main highway. "Is this your home?" I asked, taking in the manicured grounds and imposing stone facade. "One of them," Alessandro replied. "My private residence, more secure than the penthouse." We pulled into a circular drive, where Dominic opened the car door for us. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of the sea mixed with flowering jasmine that climbed the villa's walls. Under different circumstances, I might have found it beautiful. Alessandro led me through massive wooden doors into a soaring entryway of polished marble and wrought iron. Unlike the minimalist penthouse, this home felt lived in, with rich fabrics, antique furniture, and walls lined with books and artwork. "You'll stay in the East Wing," Alessandro said, guiding me up a curved staircase. "Complete privacy, separate entrance if you need it. My staff has been instructed not to disturb you without permission." "How long am I staying?" I asked, following him down a hallway decorated with landscapes of what I assumed was the Italian countryside. Alessandro stopped at a set of double doors. "As long as necessary, until we're certain Jason Mercer is no longer a threat." He opened the doors to reveal a suite larger than my entire apartment. A sitting room in soft blues and creams, a bedroom visible through another doorway, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's gardens. "This is too much," I said, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding me. Alessandro shook his head. "It's what's necessary." He gestured to a phone on a side table. "This connects directly to the house staff. If you need anything, food, clothing, medical attention, use it." "Thank you," I said, setting my duffel bag on a nearby chair. "But I don't understand any of this. Why go to such lengths for me? The truth this time." Alessandro studied me for a long moment, his amber eyes unreadable. "Rest," he said finally. "We'll talk when you've recovered." Before I could press further, he was gone, leaving me alone in a stranger's luxury. Exhaustion crashed over me in waves, the adrenaline of the morning finally ebbing. I made my way to the bedroom, where a king-sized bed with crisp white linens beckoned. Without bothering to change, I collapsed onto it, sleep claiming me instantly. I woke hours later to the warm glow of afternoon sun filtering through gauzy curtains. For a disorienting moment, I didn't recognize my surroundings. The high ceiling, the elegant furnishings, the soft bed that cradled me like a cloud. Then memory returned. Jason's attack, Alessandro's intervention, the journey to this hidden estate. After a long shower in a bathroom more luxurious than any hotel I'd ever seen, I changed into clean clothes from my bag. My throat ached when I swallowed, and a glance in the mirror confirmed that bruises had blossomed around my neck, dark purple marks in the shape of Jason's fingers. A soft knock at the outer door pulled me from my examination. I opened it to find a middle-aged woman with a kind face and graying hair pulled into a neat bun. "Miss Parker." She greeted me with a slight accent. "I'm Maria, the housekeeper. Mr. Ricci asked me to check if you needed anything." "I'm fine, thank you," I said automatically. Maria's eyes moved to the bruises on my neck, her expression softening with understanding. "I've brought some arnica cream for the bruising, and tea with honey for your throat." She gestured to a tray I hadn't noticed she was carrying. The small kindness, unexpected and genuine, brought tears to my eyes. "That's very thoughtful," I managed, stepping aside to let her enter. Maria set the tray on a table in the sitting room. "Mr. Ricci has asked if you would join him for dinner at 7. He said to tell you it's entirely your choice." I nodded, touched by the consideration of not making it a command. "Please tell him I'll be there." After Maria left, I spent the afternoon exploring my temporary sanctuary. The suite included not just the bedroom and sitting room, but a small library filled with classics in multiple languages, a private balcony overlooking gardens that stretched to a distant glimpse of ocean, and even a small kitchenette stocked with essentials. At precisely 6:45, Maria returned to escort me to dinner. We descended the grand staircase and moved through corridors adorned with art that looked valuable enough to hang in museums. The house was quiet, our footsteps muffled by thick carpets. Alessandro waited in a dining room smaller and more intimate than I'd expected, with a table set for two before windows that framed the sunset over the ocean. He rose when I entered, his eyes moving briefly to the bruises on my neck before meeting my gaze. "You look better," he said. "Rest has done you good." "Hard not to rest in a bed that comfortable," I replied, taking the seat a silent server held out for me. Alessandro smiled faintly. "I am glad you approve." The first course arrived, a delicate soup that soothed my aching throat. We ate in companionable silence for several minutes before I gathered the courage to speak. "What happened to Jason?" I asked quietly. Alessandro set down his spoon. "He's on a plane to Seattle as we speak." When he arrives, he'll be met by associates of mine who will ensure he understands the consequences of returning. You didn't. I hesitated. He's still alive? Contrary to what you may believe, Eliana, I don't kill people for inconveniencing me. His lips curved in a humorless smile. Jason Mercer will live a long, healthy life, provided he stays at least 3,000 miles from you. Relief washed through me, followed by confusion at my own reaction. Why should I care if Jason lived or died after what he'd done to me? But the thought of having his death on my conscience, even indirectly, was more weight than I wanted to carry. Thank you, I said, for everything, for coming when I called, for this. I gestured to encompass the room, the house, the sanctuary he'd provided. Alessandro inclined his head slightly. You're under my protection now. That means something. But why? You still haven't told me the real reason. The server returned, clearing our soup bowls and replacing them with the main course. Alessandro waited until we were alone again before answering. When I told you about my sister, that was true, he said, his voice lower. After her death, I made a promise, to myself, to her memory, that I would never again stand by while someone suffered as she did. He met my eyes. But that's not the only reason. What is? The night you fled Harbor View, one of my security teams found you collapsed in an alley 3 blocks away. You were barely conscious, bleeding from a cut on your face. Alessandro's expression darkened at the memory. They brought you to me. I stared at him, uncomprehending. That's impossible. I would remember. You were in shock. Hypothermic. The doctor I called said you might not remember. A fragmented memory surfaced. Being lifted, carried, a warm room, gentle hands cleaning the cut on my cheekbone, a voice with an accent telling me I was safe. It was you, I whispered. You helped me that night. Alessandro nodded once. You stayed at one of my properties until morning. When you were stronger, you said you wanted to disappear, start over. I respected that choice. Had my people help you find the apartment, arrange the jobs at the diner and coffee shop. Marco, I realized. He works for you. Most of the businesses in the East Side answer to me in some capacity. Alessandro took a sip of wine. I kept my distance, had my people watch over you from afar. Until 3 nights ago, when I received word that Jason Mercer had been seen asking questions near Brood Awakening. The pieces clicked into place, a puzzle suddenly solved. So when you came to the coffee shop, I wanted to assess the threat myself, see if you were ready to accept help, or if you were still running. His eyes held mine. I recognize something in you, Eliana, a strength you haven't yet fully realized. I looked down at my plate, overwhelmed by the revelation that Alessandro had been part of my life for months, without my knowledge. That my escape, my fresh start, had been facilitated by the very man sitting across from me. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? I asked. Would you have believed me? Alessandro countered. Or would you have seen it as another man trying to control your life, claim ownership of your story? He was right, and we both knew it. 3 months ago, traumatized and desperate to escape, I would have fled from anyone claiming to have saved me. Especially someone like Alessandro Ricci. What happens now? I asked, the question that had been hovering since morning. Now you have choices, Alessandro said. Real choices, not the illusions of choice Jason gave you. He leaned forward slightly. The money I offered is still yours. You can leave, start somewhere new, or you can stay here, in this house, for as long as you need. Or, he paused, you can return to your life in the city, with my continued protection from a distance. And if I stay? I met his gaze directly. What would that mean? Something flickered in Alessandro's eyes. Heat, possibility, but carefully restrained. It would mean safety, independence, the chance to heal. He held my gaze. Nothing more than you're willing to give. The air between us seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. I'd seen the way he looked at me, not with Jason's possessive desire, but with something deeper, more patient. More dangerous, perhaps, because it tempted me to want things I'd sworn never to seek again. I need time, I said finally. To think. To decide what I want. Alessandro nodded. Take all the time you need. This sanctuary is yours for as long as necessary. The rest of dinner passed with lighter conversation. Alessandro told me about the estate, built by his grandfather when he first came to America. I shared stories from my childhood in a small town 3 states away, before life had hardened me. Neither of us mentioned Jason or the decision that hung between us. After dinner, Alessandro walked me to the entrance of the East Wing, maintaining a respectful distance. At the threshold of my suite, he paused. Whatever you decide, Eliana, remember this. Your scars don't define you. They're simply proof that you were stronger than whatever tried to destroy you. With that, he left me to my thoughts. Days passed in peaceful seclusion. I explored the estate's gardens, swam in the indoor pool, read books from the extensive library. The bruises on my neck faded from purple to yellow to green before disappearing entirely. Alessandro was often absent, tending to his businesses, but we shared dinner each evening, gradually learning each other's stories. I learned about the boy who had grown up in his father's shadow, who had taken control of the family empire at 17 and transformed it into something that straddled the line between legitimate and criminal. He learned about the small-town girl with dreams of becoming a writer, whose life had been derailed by a charming man who turned out to be a monster. 2 weeks after I arrived, I made my decision. I found Alessandro in his study, surrounded by papers and a laptop showing financial charts. He looked up when I entered, setting aside his work immediately. I've been thinking, I said, taking the chair opposite his desk, about what you said. About my scars not defining me. Alessandro waited, giving me space to continue. For so long I've been running, hiding. First from Jason, then from my own past. I took a deep breath. I don't want to run anymore. What do you want, Eliana? He asked softly. I want to reclaim my life. My real life, not the half-existence I've been living. I met his eyes steadily. I want to go back to college, finish my degree. I want to write again. And I want to stop hiding my scars. All of them, physical and otherwise. A smile spread across Alessandro's face. Not the controlled, restrained expressions I'd seen before, but something genuine, warm. And where do you want to do these things? Here, I said, the word a leap of faith. In this city. Not hiding in the shadows anymore. Alessandro rose from his desk, moving around it to stand before me. He extended his hand, and I took it, allowing him to help me to my feet. The city can be dangerous, he said, his voice low. Especially for someone associated with me. I know. But I'm tired of letting fear dictate my choices. I kept my hand in his. I'm not asking for promises, Alessandro. I'm not looking for rescue. But I'd like to see where this path leads. With you, he lifted my left hand, turning it to expose the scars on my wrist. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed his lips to the largest scar, the one that had hurt the most, that I had hidden the longest. Stop hiding your scars, he whispered against my skin. They're beautiful to me. In that moment, standing in the golden afternoon light of his study, I felt something bloom inside me, fragile and tentative, but real. Not the desperate, clinging emotion Jason had called love, but something healthier. Something with roots in mutual respect and shared understanding. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be complications, setbacks, moments of doubt. Alessandro's world was dangerous. His business dealings would always skirt the edges of legality. My own journey toward healing had only just begun. But for the first time in years, I looked toward the future, without fear. Whatever came next, I would face it standing tall, scars exposed to the light. No longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I chose to do next, and I chose to stay.